nothing else to do. Last time we were talking about Coy versus Iowa. We're talking about the fact that until 1988, if a child accused somebody of something, they had to face their accuser in the court of law. This has just come out with the whistleblower, the infamous whistleblower, and the Ukrainian situation with Donald Trump, with the President of the United States. According to the transcripts of his telephone call, Donald Trump was keeping military aid away from Ukraine until Ukraine started an investigation against Joe Biden and Joe Biden's son. That's what it sounded like in the transcript. He claims that's not what it says. The whistleblower, of course, heard the telephone conversation. He or she, we don't know whether it's a male or a female, got so appalled at the fact that he was trying to withhold military aid to Ukraine for a political purposes.
Was this whistleblower part of his administration?
Yes, yeah. He was part of the intelligence department, NSA.
Was it the guy from CIA?
We don't know who it was, but of course the same thing happened with the Nixon tapes. There was an individual that they started calling Deep Throat, who kept giving them information about what was going on in the Nixon administration.
Did they ever reveal that person's identity?
Deep Throat died about 5 years ago.
Was he a congressman?
No, he was a member of the Nixon White House.
Why did they call him Deep Throat?
They called him Deep Throat because they didn't know who he was.
Oh, okay.
And nobody could ever figure out who it was. And he finally disclosed himself just before he died. Or somebody disclosed themselves just before this guy died. So he was either Deep Throat or he wasn't, I guess. But we don't know who the whistleblower is at this point. But Trump is claiming that they can't impeach him. He has a right to see his accuser. And of course, that's dangerous because this guy could be executed or assassinated or whatever. The ninjas could come out and kill him, or her, whichever the case may. Could be a female. Anyway, so that has come up.
Isn't it crazy that, did you hear about how much money Trump made in a day after that impeachment?
No.
I think it said he got like 20 million or something like that. The
People
day
donated to his campaign?
Yeah, donated
There you go.
after that impeachment.
That's interesting, isn't it? He may never make it to the next election, though.
Yeah, so they were saying he got donations from every state.
Oh, was that right? Even Rhode Island, huh? So this is coming up. I mean, the whole idea of facing your accuser. Of course, when we're talking about a child, then they potentially could be intimidated by their accuser or by the person that abused them. So in a Supreme Court case, Coy versus Iowa in 1988, they decided, of course, that they could testify not in the courtroom. They could be someplace else and testify. There we go. Anyway, that's Coy versus Iowa, but the story's not over with yet. Iowa changed their laws, but that's Iowa. I'm sorry, Keith. Is that camera in your way?
I'm just reading. No, it's not. I'm just reading the bottom part.
Okay.
It's okay.
But the story's not over with yet. Or maybe it is. Oh, sorry. That was dirt. There we go. All right, now it'll work. Okay. That was in 1988. So the states around the United States, all the states around the United States started changing their laws because of Coy versus Iowa. The states do not have to follow the Supreme Court unless the Supreme Court tells them they have to. So in 1990, there was a case, Maryland versus Craig. The court decided that a law permitting a child to give testimony in a different part of the courthouse and have the testimony transmitted to the courtroom via closed-circuit television was okay. It was okay. So now we have closed-circuit television. This is in 1990. Of course, all this technology is brand new. Back in 1990, closed-circuit television was relatively new. The military had it, but nobody else did. This is right, the wall came down in 1989. So the military didn't start giving away their technology, like GPS and the internet. All of that's military stuff. The GPS was a targeting system that the military had. And of course they couldn't just let civilians have it because then they would be giving it to the Russians. So here we had all this stuff. And when the wall came down and when the Cold War ended, all this technology went onto the market. They started selling this stuff. And closed-circuit television was one of them. Was one of the ideas, because they had closed-circuit television for all of in guard shacks and whatnot. So they had cameras all over the military installations, especially the nuclear military installations. The law applied to cases where the child was likely to suffer significant emotional distress by being in the presence of the defendant. Craig thus modified the rule of the Coy case. The Coy case, the child was able to testify someplace else. At least with closed-circuit television, they could actually see the testimony with closed-circuit television. Children give more detailed statements when allowed to testify on closed-circuit television, and children also feel less nervous when allowed to testify outside of the courtroom. However, children who testify via closed-circuit television are viewed less positively than children who testify in open court. Okay, so now we have a dilemma. They're more likely to believe the child if the child is actually in the court. Of course, that traumatizes the child, and this is not a good thing. We certainly don't want to traumatize the child more than the child is already traumatized.
Why is that? Is it just...
It's juries. Juries just don't believe them as much. They think that they can fabricate more things if they're not in the courtroom, if they're not intimidated by the judge and the jury and the seriousness of the case. If they have,
are a lot of cases more likely to be dismissed if the child is
testifies this way?
testifying closed circuit versus the person? Really? Is there data
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah. It really all depends. But they're more likely to dismiss the case. Provided, the other modifications that they've looked at, so we have closed-circuit television, we have the child's deposition, and the deposition is presented, and of course, if the child's deposition is presented to the court, it's being presented by somebody else. A lot of times they want the child to come into the courtroom so that the jury can see the child and see how fragile the child is, and that gives them more empathy toward the child's case. But other ideas about how we can deal with this, provide an advocate who can familiarize the child with the courtroom setting. The courtroom is very intimidating. It's very traumatizing. If you've ever been in a court of law, it's not the most pleasant thing in the world. Permit a support person to sit with the child during testimony. Make structural changes to the courtroom so that the child doesn't have to see their accuser, but the jury can see the child. Each state has their own rules. That's just the way it works. And there's a lot of people try to change these the laws and whatnot in order to make it more likely that the individual will be found guilty. Emotionally motivated forgetting is called repression. This is a psychological term. It has become a term of law. The forgotten events are thought to be so traumatizing that the individuals bury them deeply in their unconscious. And if you were repressing traumatic minds, ideas. If you were repressing traumatic ideas, you wouldn't know that you were doing it because it's repressed, okay? So it's back there somewhere.
So with that, is that where they use hypnosis?
They use hypnosis to get these repressed ideas out.
So, all right, can you do hypnosis?
Can I do hypnosis? I have done hypnosis
Does
in
it
the
work?
past. We don't know.
But you can
We do
hypnotize
get
a person.
information, but we're not exactly sure how accurate it is. It's really kind of interesting. Freud worked with a guy by the name of Brewer, and Brewer would hypnotize people. He would claim that he was getting information out of these individuals that was very accurate. Freud wasn't sure exactly how accurate it was. And so Freud never used hypnosis. The people before Freud who did psychoanalysis, a form of psychoanalysis, they used hypnosis, but he would not.
How does hypnosis work?
Hypnosis, let's see, how can I explain this to you? It makes you concentrate on being asleep. So it's just, it's suggestion. So if I can get you to focus on one thing, and that's where they use the stupid watch, which doesn't really work. But what I need you to do is get to focus on one thing, and then you will, it will be like you're asleep. Now, the problem with that, and this was Freud's argument, was are they dreaming or are we really delving into their subconscious? That was what his point was. And he wasn't exactly sure. Now, he had used it, but he wasn't very happy with it. So he never used it again. He used it in the beginning when he was working with Brewer, but he never used it again because he thought maybe you were dreaming. And so you can dream about anything, about all kinds of funny things. But Brewer claimed that he was able to get into their subconscious and pull out information that was factual. So what is real and what's not real? This is the other question that we have. I mean, if we're using hypnosis to get into their repressed mind, are we really dealing with what happened, or are we really dealing with what they were thinking? Because you don't have to think. Thinking doesn't have to be accurate. It's like dreaming. Dreaming is certainly not accurate. But what if you were thinking, gee, I sure would like to have had sex with Marilyn Monroe. Or she died in 1963. So if I thought that a lot, and then you hypnotized me, and I said I had sex with Marilyn Monroe, it may just have been my imagination. But I had implanted that in my own brain, this idea that I had sex with Marilyn Monroe. She died in 1963. 1963, I was 14 years old. Just using that as an example. I was only 14, and she was, what, 36? Yeah. And I was probably never within 1,000 miles of Marilyn Monroe in my life. Okay. But if I had thought about that, and I thought about that to the extent that it became part of my subconscious, then potentially, if you hypnotized me, then I would say that I had sex with Marilyn Monroe.
So more than likely, hypnosis doesn't really work, it's not accurate?
It's, in most courts of law, it cannot be admitted as evidence.
There is one that I remember hearing about. There was one where they hypnotized this lady to try to get an ID on their license plate.
Right.
But that was the only one I think ever.
And they actually were able to
Yeah.
find the car.
Yeah,
and
and
actually
they link it all back to this one person. There you go.
So there you go. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. We'll pretend that it. At least you're delving into their subconscious. You're getting into their repressed memories. The reality is that we all have repressed memories to some extent. Maybe our brother wait a minute, I do have a story. When I was, we were all, none of us were in school, so I must have been 3 or 4 years old. Anyway, we were playing with these wooden train tracks, and then you had the wooden, I don't know if you've seen these things. Anyway, we had these wooden train tracks, and we were beating on a hassock, a big stool. We were beating on a hassock like we were Indians, and we were playing the drums, okay. And my brother kept hitting me in the hand with his, he was, he's doing this thing. He was manscaping, I guess, spreading out as much as he could. He kept hitting me, and he kept pushing me over, and he kept hitting me in the hand to push me over. And I got mad at him, and I took that train track and I hit him in the nose. And I cut his nose, the bridge of his nose, and cut into an artery in his nose. And so he's running through the house, squirting blood like crazy. Of course, he's only 4 years old, and I'm only, I don't know, I was 2 or 3 years old.
You can't have been too young, you can't remember anything until after 3.
Right, well, I was probably 3 or 4, I don't know how old he was. My sister was a year older than I was, and he was a year older than she was, so he was about 2 years older than I was. I couldn't have been more than 4 or 5, I guess. But then he would be 7 years old. We were all running around in our underwear, which happened a lot. I mean, we lived in the country. Well, I guess it wasn't cold enough to put clothes on or something. Anyway.
So what happened?
My mother's a nurse, and she saved his life. My mother was there. Somehow she staunched the bleeding. He still has a scar on his nose.
Does he remember what happened? How it happened?
Did he remember? Yeah, of course he tells the story way differently. I just got mad hitting him in the nose is what he remembered. He didn't remember hitting me in the hands with the train tracks.
That's interesting too.
And my mother took all those train tracks and hid them for like 3 or 4 years because anyway, that could potentially be a repressed memory. And the way that I remember him hitting my hands, and he doesn't remember hitting my hands. So the question is, did that actually happen? Did he actually hit me in the hands? I can feel him hitting me in the hands with those train tracks. That doesn't mean it happened. Okay. So I may have embellished the memory so that to exonerate me for hitting him in the face. Hitting him in the nose. We were having, for some reason, my mother bought us boxing gloves. There were 4 boys, and we were all about the same age. And we were boxing, and we kept having boxing matches, which was stupid because, I mean, these were real boxing gloves, and we really hit each other. But I hit my brother. He had his tongue stuck out, and I hit him in the chin. I know, and he bit into his tongue.
Oh my God.
I know, he started bleeding like crazy. I know. The same brother that I hit him in the nose.
Are you sure you were telling the truth when you said your ex-wives were abusing you?
Yeah, well, I abused my brothers, and then they paid me back, I guess. These repressed memories, yeah, that's a possibility. I could be telling you complete fabrications. And that's just the way I remember things. But I certainly do remember things the way I'm telling them. Or maybe I've embellished all this stuff. Maybe the water wasn't really boiling when she poured it over my
Maybe you're trying to
head.
exonerate yourself.
I'm sorry? All the stab
I
wounds
said, no,
I had?
I think you're trying to exonerate yourself.
There we go,
Just kidding.
okay. I do have those scars. It's kind of hard to miss. I lost all the skin off the top of my ears when she poured that. I was lucky she didn't bald me or something.
You sure those weren't self-inflicted? Just kidding.
Yeah, I poured water over my own head. Okay, so we're talking about repressed memories. These repressed memories sometimes stay forgotten unless and until they are spontaneously recalled by exposure to some aspect of the original experience. Something has to happen, and of course, we've pressed all this memory as deep into our brains as possible. So potentially something will happen and it will trigger a memory. And of course, this happens to combat veterans. They repress all these memories, and then they'll see something and it will remind them of things. Usually it has to do with a time when they were really scared. I hate to say that, but there's a lot of blood, there's a lot of gore, there's pulling triggers, there's stirring hand grenades, but it usually has to do with how scared was I. And if they ever get scared again, then those memories will come flooding back and what they did. So it has to do with being scared shitless, as it were. Some suggest that repression has never been proven to exist, and that the inability to remember traumatic effects can be explained by ordinary forgetting. That is a lawyer's point of view. Lawyers claim that we can't prove this. We can't prove repressed thoughts because you can't remember them. Okay. But psychologists know that they do exist. But of course, we can't prove it in a court of law. You can't prove forgetting. It's really hard to do. So we can't do the research that would show that. Who's going to put together the study that shows that repression really exists? Who could do that? Yeah. And what would it be? What would it look like? It'd have to be a traumatic event, so you'd have to traumatize somebody, and then they would have to forget it, and then you would have to force them to remember it. Now, how in the world are you going to do that? How are you going to create that study? A related unconscious process is dissociation. In dissociation, victims of abuse or other traumas are thought to escape the full impact of an experience by psychologically detaching themselves from it. And of course, dissociative identity disorder, where the individual develops multiple personalities. This is an example of dissociative identity disorder, multiple personality disorder. We used to call it multiple personality disorder, and now we call it dissociative identity disorder. It's really kind of interesting if you have a little girl that was molested as a child, if she creates new persona, new personalities. One of the personalities will be a mean boy, a boy that can take care of her, that potentially can punish the person for doing what that person is doing. She'll also create an individual that is a little girl. A little girl before, who's younger than she was when she was molested. And this little girl represents innocence, as curious as that is. All of this is very logical. Who would she like to be? Well, she'd like to be that innocent little girl before she was molested. That's who she'd like to be. Would she like to punish the individual that molested her? Yes, she would. Therefore, she creates this persona of this little boy. And of course, if she if he continues to molest her, or she, whichever the case may be, continues to molest her, the little boy doesn't care. He obviously doesn't have the ability to punish the individual, so he doesn't care about the molestation. Doesn't mean anything to the little boy. So she creates these persona that she can slip into so that she feels better about herself. She's the innocent little girl. She feels better about herself because she is a boy that can beat up or at least can fight the individual that's molesting.
Is this more likely to happen?
No, it doesn't happen very often.
It's not very
Dissociative identity disorder, when it does happen, usually happens to somebody with a really high IQ.
Or does it depend on the severity of the abuse?
No, not
that
really.
they- Not really?
No, it all depends on what kind of how intelligent the individual is. Most of us live in one world. We have a reality. We have an ideal self and we have a real self. But this individual is able to separate themselves into different persona. And it does become a mental illness that has to be treated. The weird part is that it's really difficult to get them to become another persona, their other persona, the one that they are using to protect themselves. Because these are all protecting persona. These are persona that they drift into when they need to be protected. So weirdly enough, what you have to do if you're counseling one of these individuals is you can't really put them in danger in order for these persona to come out. But you have to talk to them and get them to remember the trauma, and then you can get the other persona to come out. If they feel threatened, the other persona can come out. But sometimes they know that the persona are there, and sometimes they don't.
What if there are people that haven't gone through trauma, but can they still use this?
You know, that's an excellent question, and I've never known of a case. These are relatively rare, and it's really difficult to find people that are actually suffering from dissociative identity disorder. When I was working on my PhD, one of my professors was the expert in the United States on dissociative identity disorder. A lot of people don't believe that it exists, but he was the expert. So what the hell was he doing teaching at Walden University? That's a good question. It was really kind of fascinating listening to some of the cases. Sometimes these persona can be created with just one incident, and sometimes it's multiple incidents. But these individuals tend to have imaginations. They tend to have, let's see, how can I say this? Imaginary friends, that's it. They have imaginary friends. Lots of imaginary friends. So their brains are used to creating scenarios where they actually have these imaginary friends are real, and they talk to them. So they would be the people that, if you've ever seen the movie Harvey, where he thinks he actually has a giant rabbit that follows him around, and he knows exactly where he is. So he's walking around this rabbit as if the rabbit was actually there. And these individuals would have these imaginary friends that were very similar. Oh, don't step on salad, that kind of.
Is this similar to schizophrenia?
No. These people don't suffer from schizophrenia, and they don't have the genetic structure that causes schizophrenia. They don't have the DNA. They just have amazing imaginations.
Is the behavior kind of similar? Is the behavior kind of similar?
No, not really, because this is the only problem that they actually have. With a lot of the mental illnesses, you see other symptoms, depression and anxiety and paranoia. You see all these other symptoms, but with this, there's not any other symptoms.
So a person that has this type of problem, they wouldn't be dealing with depression or anything else?
No, these would be individuals that have a persona to take care of that. Yes. Oh, I thought you were raising your hand. You weren't. Okay. As interesting as that is. Yeah, they seem to be pretty happy people. Relatively happy people. So why do they come in? There's something that's bothering them and they don't understand what it is. So there's something niggling in the back of their mind, and they just want to explore it to find out what it is. But then again, these are the individuals that are very intelligent, and they have really amazing imaginations. So
What about people with multiple personality disorder? Is it the same as that?
Yeah.
That's
That's
basically it, yeah.
that's what we used to call it the old days.
Oh,
This
okay.
is the new name, dissociative identity disorder. Most of the reports of repressed and recovered memories involve claims of childhood sexual abuse. The theory is that individuals suffered sexual or physical abuse as children, often at the hands of a trusted adult, and that's usually the biggest problem. It was somebody in the house, dad. It's normally not a boyfriend or a stepfather. It's usually somebody that's not supposed to be doing this. A favorite brother, not usually an uncle. An uncle's just too distant. It's usually somebody that is supposed to be protecting you. My second wife was molested by her brother, her older brother. And she thought she was protecting her young sisters by allowing him to go ahead and bother her so he wouldn't mess with her three younger sisters. Turns out he's messing with them too. And they didn't find out until a family reunion. This is ugly. Because there were 6 sisters, 6 of them. And there were 3 brothers, 6 sisters. And she was number 4. She was number 3. And he had molested the older sisters as well. He was the oldest brother. He was the oldest child in the family. And he had molested the 2 older sisters, and then he molested my ex-wife. And then he had molested the other 3 as well. I think that's what it was. Maybe she was 4. So there were 3 sisters in front of her, and 2 sisters behind her. That's what it was. Yeah, he was trying to protect them. She was trying to protect them. So she let him mess with her. Turns out he was messing with everybody.
Did he ever go to jail for that?
No. Hell no. No, the family wouldn't. Mother didn't want to admit it. It was that kind of a deal. All the sisters came out screaming at him at this family reunion. He just left. And when they started telling all the stories and they realized he was doing exactly the same thing, sometimes at the same time, to all of them. So he was molesting all of them. It's not like he had a favorite that he would pick on for 6 months and then he would bounce to another one. It's not the way it worked. He was messing with all of them at the same time. Even the little ones. Repressed or dissociated dissociated any memory of these horrors for many years. These individuals are repressing their memories, recovered their memories of the abuse when it was psychologically safe to do so. And that's normally what happens. They do remember them later on, but it has to be a safe environment. And sometimes these multiple personas never come out. They just never do. They don't need them anymore. So they're gone. They just don't need to come out anymore. They don't need the same protection. It was painful when she told me about her brother. I mean, what you want to do is go down there and beat him up. Of course, he was a lot bigger than I was. That wasn't going to happen. And he was in Georgia and we were in Texas, so that wasn't going to happen either. Sometimes repressed memories are recovered only after a person participates in psychotherapy that applies techniques such as hypnosis, age regression, guided visualization, diary writing, or therapist instructions to help clients remember. But there can be a problem. You can implant memories that aren't real, that aren't true. Just by suggesting. What is real and what was just a thought or a memory or a movie that you saw that was very important to you and stuck in your mind? Did that really happen to you? Many researchers and therapists question the validity of these memories, and this is a problem. We don't know if they're real or if they're not real. Given the right set of circumstances, people can create memories of incidents that never occurred. Psychologists have been able to implant false memories by enlisting the help of family members who suggest to adult research participants that these relatives recall a fabricated event. They can ask participants to imagine events that never occurred. They can doctor family photographs. Now, we have done a lot of research in this area, trying to prove that you can implant untrue memories. They've done it, and that's why there are 3 of them there. Because that's how they did it in their research. They enlisted family members to suggest that something happened. They've asked them to imagine events that never occurred, and they've doctored family photographs in research, proving that they can implant false memories in people's minds. So this is a tough one. This is really tough. When I was up north, one of the honored families on the reservation, all of a sudden the grandfather went to jail. And everybody was going, what's going on? Well, one of the granddaughters had a repressed memory of him molesting her. And she swore on a stack of Bibles and all the rest of it. And he went to jail for about 1.5 years. This is an old man. He was in his 70s. They took him to jail. This theoretically had happened 20, 30 years before. Was it true or was it not true? Well, everybody in the family swore that could never have happened. It would never have happened. He was around all of his granddaughters. He never touched anybody inappropriately. But this one who had moved off the reservation, had moved away. She moved to Seattle. And in Seattle, she had started seeing someone, a psychologist, and all of a sudden this came out. And they put him in jail. He was in jail for about 18 months, finally got out. He ran all the powwows, and all of a sudden he was gone. And so all the powwows kind of just collapsed. And then he came back, and he was afraid to even go to the powwows. He was afraid somebody would beat him up or something. So it just split the family right down the middle. Not really, because nobody really believed it. And of course, none of his friends believed it. It was really a sad situation. But evidently they had her testimony. They had enough evidence that they convicted him and they sent him to jail. But I'm not exactly sure what the evidence was because it was all cloistered, of course. Merely imagining or viewing a photo associated with a fabricated event can dramatically increase the rate of false memories, even when the event is completely implausible. Why? The act of imagining may make the event seem more familiar, but the familiarity that is mistakenly related to childhood memories rather than to the act of imagination itself. So it may just be imagination. And it fits in your imagination, but it doesn't really fit with what was going on. You may remember being in a house that you didn't live in for 2 more years. You were being molested in a house that you weren't actually in. And your family didn't move to that house until 2 years later, when you were 2 years older. And you remember it happening when you were 4 years old in a select place, but it couldn't have been because you were not there at that point. Did anybody ever have monsters in their closet or under their bed when you were kids? Did you have monsters? There weren't any monsters? You guys are all lucky, no monsters. We had mice in our attic, and they would just scramble up and down there.
It was boogeyman or the man that was outside.
Oh, there was somebody outside.
Yeah.
So you couldn't go outside, but you were safe in your bed.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope you had an indoor toilet. There was somebody outside, but nobody else. Did you have an outdoor toilet?
Yeah.
Whoops. How in the world did you ever go to the bathroom at night? Well, you couldn't go outside because the boogeyman was out there, right?
Yeah.
All right, I was just curious. And I'm not trying to re-traumatize you.
So that's why you have to go bathroom in the evening before someone down.
Ah, okay. Well, that's really kind of sad and interesting. So we do have imaginations, and that person was real to you, that dangerous person, boogeyman or whatever you want to call
I
it.
guess later on you start to develop, you start attaching these things to it, like horror movies or things that depict what a boogeyman would be. You start imagining these things being out there too.
Is that right? So he gained friends with
Yeah.
every horror movie that you watched.
Yeah.
Okay. So this clown thing, they got one downstairs on the window. This new Pennyworth, is that it?
Pennywise.
Pennywise, okay. Is that
Pennyworth. His cousin.
Pennywise, okay, now that has joined your pantheon of horror monsters outside your.
Well, it's more of like the things you hear, what people feed your mind. So then, like, you start hearing stories of like, oh, there's skinwalkers,
Sure.
shape-shifting things. You don't know if they're really real.
Okay.
Just things like that.
Okay. So do you do anything to protect yourself?
Close your windows.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, you're wearing black clothes, I guess you're kind of like a ninja. They can't see you, I'm guessing. Oh, wait a minute, you got on dark clothes too. And you both had boogeyman outside. Well, that's interesting. So are you invisible in the dark because of your dark clothes? No, that could have worked. Okay. Well, Pennywise.
Pennywise, yeah.
Okay. And he's a clown.
Mhm.
Not very funny.
It's crazy because this last week in Avery's class on Thursday, he was talking about that when they do the blackening way. He was talking about how like when they do the blackening way, it's to try to hide yourself from what's bothering you. So like he was saying, like that's the reason why they do it. Like they cover your whole body.
Right, with ashes.
Yeah, and then to smell is to mask your odor. So like they won't, whatever's coming around won't know you're there. They'll know something's there, but they won't know it's you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because of the ashes.
Yeah, the ashes and the smell from the whatever. There's like a smell that they. I don't
Oh,
know.
they put something on you.
Yeah,
Smell.
I think it's more like the fat or whatever from the sheep,
Oh,
because
okay.
that's what it smells like. It smells pretty weird.
I think I'd rather be recognized by whatever this monster is.
Then to smell like mud.
Well, I've got deodorant on, so I think I'm okay. Unfortunately, without corroboration, it is very hard to know which distant memories are true and which are implanted via suggestion. And of course, now we're talking about Pennywise, who looks, well, we won't go into what he looks like. There was a guy that murdered a bunch of kids, and he dressed up as a clown. And he kind of looked like Pennywise. But that's,
There's a show called The Mentalist. The guy uses the power of suggestion very well. Like it's pretty crazy how he does it.
it's the way hypnotists do it. And they can hypnotize people. Some people you can't hypnotize, most people you can. If you've got a good imagination, usually you can be hypnotized. If you don't daydream, then it's really hard to hypnotize someone. I don't think I've ever been hypnotized. But then again, I wouldn't remember, would I? Accusations that arise from recovered memories sometimes result in litigation, although note that at times prosecutors have decided not to pursue cases based solely on repressed memory because of the high burden for admissibility of testimony based on repressed memories. That's really hard to present that in court if we're talking about repressed memories. Some accusers have retracted their claims of repressed memories for abuse. Unfortunately, of course, for my friend, that's not what happened. Parents have sued therapists who used memory recovery techniques to help their adult children recover supposedly repressed memories of childhood sexual assault. The claims in these malpractice lawsuits usually take the following form. The abuse never occurred, of course. The therapist created and implanted false memories of abuse through their use of memory retrieval techniques. Clients ultimately came to believe the false memories and accused the alleged abuser. Now this is a problem. This is a real serious problem because potentially they came into them for some reason. And the psychologist it actually implanted these memories into that individual. So they actually made the person worse than they were before because they were digging for these memories of childhood sexual assault. So they actually convinced the person that they had been sexually assaulted. Well, if they hadn't been sexually assaulted, what are we dealing with? Well, we're dealing with an individual that's easily suggestible, unfortunately. And now they have a mental illness. Now they think they were sexually assaulted. And that's the end of that chapter. We're going to deal with, the next chapter is chapter 6. I know I'm a little bit behind. This is like the only class I'm behind in. We're going to talk about victims. We're going to talk about victims.
So that guy you're talking about that got convicted after all these years
Yeah.
of molestation, isn't there like a statute of limitations when it comes to things like that?
Not usually, no, not childhood sexual assault.
So you can bring those up
Sure.
years later?
Well, it depends on the state you're dealing with. This was Montana, so. Yeah. Some states, they do have statute of limitations on these things, but other states, they don't. What just came out, Demi Moore was, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just talking to Jeremiah about this. Of course, he's working with the MMDR, the Murdered and Missing Domestic Relatives.
Deny relatives.
Dene relatives, that's it. Yeah, he's dealing with this, so he deals with it on a daily basis, poor guy. Kind of feel sorry for him. So we talk about it all the time. And he was talking about the Demi Moore case, and he was saying that Demi Moore she didn't like herself because her mother sold her. And if you think about it, you know, sometimes you're being sexually assaulted by somebody, by your father, or by an uncle or a trusted brother, and then all of a sudden, and this ruins your life. But in her case, she was being sold to an older man who had access to her anytime he wanted because he was wealthy and he was paying her mother a lot of money. So this happened when she was 15 years old, so she had a low self-esteem. And so since sexuality was one of the things that was very important to very rich men, she used that and she became a sexual predator. And that's what she was talking about when she was talking about John Cryer. She was looking for bad boys, individuals that were sexually aggressive because she was sexually aggressive. And she married Bruce Willis, and the marriage lasted for an extended length of time, about 15 years. They produced 3 children. And then she hooked up with Ashton Kutcher, who at the time was kind of a naive young person, and she just, from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, by the way. Anyway, and she stayed with him because this was her persona, this sexually aggressive female. And if you watch her in movies, then she plays sexually aggressive females very well. She was a stripper in one movie, G.I. Jane. She was a really tough individual. So she played those characters very, very well. And now, of course, we find out that it all stems from when she was 15 years old and her mother literally sold her to this guy. Victims. Anyway, we're talking about victims. Something else happened yesterday. There was a stabbing at a vocational school in Finland. 11 people were stabbed. 2 of them were serious. One of them died. But this guy had a gun and a knife, and going around stabbing people, and they haven't figured out why yet. But this is Finland, so in the United States, we want to know why. But in Europe, they don't do the same thing. In Asia, they don't ever find out why the guy stabbed the person. It was just incorrect. Because they're a more collectivist society. So it should be interesting to find, if we ever find out why this guy decided he was going to skewer 11 people with his knife. As curious as that is. Anyway, okay, we're going to talk about victims. While most feel sympathy toward victims who have experienced crime or violence, sometimes we blame the victim for their plight. And this was a question, this is what we were talking about yesterday, this is what Jeremiah was talking about. Was Demi Moore a victim? Well, she was in the beginning, but then she started victimizing other individuals. And so now she's a perpetrator. She seduced, I don't know what happened. It would be a great story, wouldn't it? Find out what happened with John Cryer. Evidently, John Cryer didn't perform very well, but he said, it's okay, you didn't, I wasn't traumatized, you weren't my first, it was one of those kind of deals. She thought he was a virgin, and so she was going to be his first, so it was kind of an odd situation. So later on, she victimized that other individual. Ashton Kutcher was a victim of hers. Bruce Willis wasn't, because both of them were sexually aggressive, but she used her sexuality as a weapon in essence. So is she a victim at all? Well, she was initially, when she was 15 years old. She was a victim, but later on she was a perpetrator. One reason for this is the need to believe in a just world so people get what they deserve. And that would be an interesting conversation. Did Demi Moore deserve what she got? When she was 15 and she was sold to the older men, it was her mother that sold her.
Is her mother still alive?
I don't know.
So you're asking, is it her fault?
Oh, her mother, the other thing that happened was that her mother had a mental illness, and her mother kept trying to commit suicide. And Demi Moore saved her time after time after time, kept her from committing suicide. She said that one time she pulled the pills out of her mother's mouth. She had taken a handful of pills. She pulled them out of her mouth. So I guess she was victimized. She was victimized by her mother. And she did whatever her mother wanted her to do because she was afraid her mother was going to kill herself.
Is she an only child?
I don't know. I had an opportunity to buy that book this weekend and I didn't. Oh, what's wrong with me?
I'm trying to finish that one show, When They See Us.
I'm sorry.
When They See Us? Have you guys
Sure.
heard of it?
Yeah,
Is it with the girl from Orange is the New Black?
No.
it's 4 black, or
The
4 black
Exonerated
kids,
Five
yeah.
or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a mini-series.
I think
Yeah.
so. I
Yeah.
haven't finished it. I can't finish it.
So what's happening in that
Um,
series?
I was telling you about this last week, the 5 kids that were.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh,
Okay.
But the police, it was in the other class, I told them about
Right.
this.
Oh, okay.
I didn't recognize it. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
the-
that's the one Scott stayed up all night
Yeah,
watching. Oh
yeah.
my gosh. Like, will you go to bed?
No, this is too good. How much fun is this? Anyway, so we're looking for a just world. And of course, these things come up every day. I mean, they're coming up right now as far as Trump is concerned. Is it a just world? Do the people that voted for Trump think that he's being attacked by the vicious Democrats who just want to get rid of him because he's a Republican? So where is the just world out there? Well, it's whatever you believe is the just world. Generally, when considering someone else's actions, we use dispositional attributions that focus on the person's ability level, personality, or even their temporary states. Were they tired? And when you had that automobile accident, were you tired? As explanations for the conduct in question. And I just did that when I was talking about Demi Moore's mother. Demi Moore's mother had a mental illness. She tried to commit suicide. Does this exonerate her for selling her daughter to a very wealthy man? Does it? Well, she had a mental illness. She kept trying to commit suicide. The reason Demi Moore went along with the whole deal was because she was afraid that her mother would try to kill herself. And that this was one way that she could keep her from killing herself. So who's the victim here? Or is everybody a victim? Well, we're using dispositional attribution to try to rationalize what's going on. That's why we want to know what happened in Finland. We want to know what was going on with this kid. Why did he stab 11 people? Why did he kill one of them? Why didn't he use the gun? Eventually he was shot by the cops. And the cops in Finland, they do carry weapons, but they never pull their weapons. It's kind of like England, where the bobbies never used to have weapons. They do now, but they used to never have weapons. They have them just in case of terrorists, not because of any domestic situations. Because you're not allowed to have guns in England. You're not allowed to have guns in Germany. The only guns you can have are hunting rifles, which are really hard to conceal. And they're way too long to be carried around. But when I was in Frankfurt, down by the train station where there's a lot of crazy stuff happens, I saw people armed with pistols. They were really tiny little pistols. They were like 22s. I'm not exactly sure if you could kill somebody with one, but if you wanted to kill somebody, you'd probably have to go up, put the muzzle to the person's head and pull the trigger. Because, well, they were just little bitty guns. Of course, the cops had 9mm pistols. Pulitzer, the Pulitzer. Write that down, Pulitzer. Anyway. If people are responsible for their own suffering, we feel less obligated to help them. We blame the victim for their situation, and of course, can we blame Demi Moore for her situation? Her mother was suicidal. I don't know where her father was. I need to read that book, I guess. Damn it. And I don't want to. Anyway. In 2008, approximately 21 million criminal victimizations occurred. 16 million involved property crimes, and 5 million were crimes of violence. Lots of crimes of violence in the United States. In October 1998, two powerfully built men lured slightly built gay Matthew Shepard into their truck. They took him up into the mountains and beat him to death because of his sexual orientation. I'm trying to remember where this was. It was Colorado. Yeah, it was in Colorado or Wyoming.
I think it's Laramie.
Laramie, Wyoming.
Yeah.
You're right. It was Laramie, Wyoming. Anyway, they beat the holy hell out of him. He lived for about 3 days. He didn't die. I mean, they beat him to death. They beat him to a point where he was barely alive. Somebody found him. They took him to the hospital. He lived for 3 days. He was brain dead. And they pulled the plug, and then he died, of course. But they didn't actually beat him to death. He didn't die from his, but he was in really bad shape because of exposure. This is Wyoming. It's cold up there. Legislators have been increasingly concerned about the proliferation of hate crimes, criminal acts intended to harm or intimidate people because of their race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religion, or other minority group status. We call the mass shooting in El Paso a hate crime. He was targeting Hispanics. And he said that he didn't like Hispanics because of the immigration policy. We have no immigration policy. You know, we're being invaded by Hispanics. Of course, most of the people he was shooting weren't immigrants, they were people who lived in the United States for several generations. They just happened to be Hispanic. The shooting in Pittsburgh, where the guy went into a synagogue and shot and killed, I guess he killed 11 people and he shot 26. But he hated Jews, and that's the reason he went into the synagogue to shoot people, because he hated Jews. As weird as that is. Another hate crime. Sexual orientation. Transgender women are being beaten to death in Memphis, Tennessee. As weird as that sounds. I don't know if that's a mecca for transgender people, but for some reason, transgender women are being beaten to death in Memphis. There have been 7. 2 were beaten to death over the weekend. That brought the number up to 7. Transgender women have been beaten to death in Memphis, Tennessee. Hate crimes. Yeah. Race. Black men are being shot on the street by the police. Most of them are unarmed. Why are they doing this? Because white men are afraid of black men. Why is that? Well, it goes all the way back. It goes back hundreds of years as to why they hate them. Lots of hate crimes going on in the United States. Federal government in 45 states have enacted laws that allow stiffer sentencing for defendants convicted of hate crimes. 45 states. That means there are 5 states that do not have any hate crime laws. And I am embarrassed to say that my home state of Indiana does not. They tried to pass legislation and Mike Pence vetoed it when he was governor of the state of Indiana. Yeah, shake your head, he's an asshole. And they tried to pass laws against hate, not against hate crimes, but laws against hate crimes. As stupid as that sounds, the conservative people in the state of Indiana, I swear, where did they come from? They're not my relatives. I swear to you, they are not my relatives who are trying to pass these stupid laws. But I used to see these people on Facebook, and that's the reason I'm not on Facebook anymore, because they would troll me. They would write all this horrible stuff on my Facebook account. And I don't understand how Facebook works, so it looks like I'm one of them.
Yeah.
I know, so I just
I know what you mean.
don't do that anymore. Victimization of lesbian, gay, and bisexual, transgender students. 65% of students indicated that they had been harassed during the last year. 39% reported harassment due to their appearance, and 33% said they were harassed because of their actual or perceived sexual orientation. This really confuses me. Why would I care who somebody else has sex with? Why would that anger me so much that I want to hit somebody? That really confuses me. Men and women have been fighting over each other for a really, really long time. But I figure if guys are like other guys, then they're not going to compete with me, because I don't like guys. I mean, I don't love guys like that. This just doesn't make any sense to me. This is completely illogical as far as I'm concerned. Why in the world would we attack people because of their sexual orientation? Is there any logic to it? Is it society that's telling us that everybody has to be the same? Is that what we're saying? For the longest time, religion told us that homosexuality was incorrect. It's an abomination. I love that word, abomination. It's like the only time you ever use that word. It's an abomination. And religious people used it because it was in the Bible somewhere. I don't know where it is. I've never been able to find it. It's an abomination. We've got a gay male that's running for president of the United States. And he's doing really well. And of all of the people running for president, he's probably the best speaker of everybody. He's really good. He makes a lot of sense. He always makes a lot of sense. He's a great debater.
I like the way he goes, he approaches things from a very logical perspective that Trump doesn't have.
It's not just Trump that doesn't have it. Most of the Democratic candidates don't have it either. Even the prosecutors, even the lawyers can't debate as well as Pete Buttigieg. Yeah, he's really a good speaker. So I think it's going to be Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg is going to be the vice president. Are there people that wouldn't vote for a gay male because of his sexual orientation?
Well, here in the Navajo Nation, men don't vote for women.
I said that in another class, and I just about got excoriated for it. I thought they were going to cut my guts open, my intestines come spilling out.
Yeah, so I think us Navajos were very familiar with that, like not being voted for just because of your gender or sexual orientation.
You're supposed to be matrilineal. Why would you not vote for a female?
Right?
There are tribes that are patrilineal who have had
Women.
female leaders. The Cherokee are an example. The Crow. Geez, they're buffalo hunters. And those guys had, I can't think of her name. Yeah. Tin Killer was the, no, she was the Cherokee. Anyway. I don't know. Why won't Navajo males vote for a female?
That's what we want to find out.
When you find out.
No.
Let us know. We're
You know,
still
the
trying
last
to
It's
time-
figure
kind
that
of
out.
like, okay, something that just doesn't make sense either is like on the Navajo Nation, an intoxication, public intoxication or intoxication isn't even a chargeable offense. And I feel like if it was, maybe the rate would decrease, but there's no punishment.
Okay.
It's like people get loaded up in these paddy wagons, taken to jail over and over and over again. Like, and that makes sense.
No. It makes no sense whatsoever.
It's like, if that's the case, then just leave them out there.
I think that's what they do, isn't it?
Most of the time, I think until they go involuntarily, yeah.
Actually, lately, every time I go to bashes, nobody hits me up for money. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if they have security guys out there. This is in Chinle, of course.
Oh, it's first of the month.
Let's say wait till today.
Did you do a research on that last semester? Something about these panhandlers, no?
I remember somebody.
He did research.
Yeah, it wasn't, yeah, it was more of like looking at their behaviors and stuff and what made them come back to these areas and flock to areas. It was kind of like, it was more like a stepping stone to like the bigger picture of like getting to figure out why they are where they are and try to implement these different therapies. So it was just, yeah, it was something that was kind of.
So the gas station here at Salee.
I did it in Shinle, I did it in Mini Farms, Winter Rock, and Kanta.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow, people have hit me up in the parking lot at Walmart in Gallup.
So here's the thing about that. I won't give them money, but I will buy them something to eat. I can't, if somebody's hungry, I just can't pass them by.
How do you know they're hungry?
Because they ask, like, okay, if they're like, oh, do you have $1, whatever, I'm like, okay, well, what is it for? I'm hungry. Okay, well, if you're hungry, I'll buy you something to eat.
I took a guy over to Burger King and bought him a meal one time. And he took it outside and sold it.
I got these 2 cheeseburgers. So.
I just usually tell them, like, you're older than me, you're my uncle. You're supposed to be taking care of me,
Ah.
not the other way around. I'm not supposed to
way
be
to
doing
look
this
at
for you. I was like, ni I was like, if you can't provide for yourself or even people like me, then go home, and go plant your garden, do something at home so that way you're not out here doing this. There's plenty of things to do at home. There's gardens, there's raking, there's firewood now that we're going back into the cold season. I don't know, maybe if you have animals, people in your family have animals, maybe go help them take care of it, bring them water. Maybe they'll give you money if you help them like that. That's what I tell them about it.
I've had people hit me up for money at bashes, and other individuals come up and say, "You're embarrassing our people," and, screaming at this guy. And of course, I felt like I was being screamed at the same. Don't give him money. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I certainly won't.
Yeah, and then the return reaction from them is always like, oh yeah, Tina, I'll go home. Like, dang, you're mean. I'm like, that's right. That's why my kids are in school.
Fun stuff. LGBT students were 3 times as likely to report feeling unsafe at school, 22% versus 7% of non-LGBT students, and 1.5 times as likely to have been harassed, 90% versus 62%. More teachers, 53%, than students, 36% reported that they considered bullying or harassment to be a serious problem at their school. So the kids don't see it. The kids don't recognize it, especially if they're the bullies, they don't think it's happening. There was a Big Bang episode where they were talking to Penny. She said there was hardly any bullying at our school. It turned out that she was the one that was doing the bullying, of course. And she was with Bernadette and Amy, and of course they felt bullied by her. So they were kind of scared of her, of course. Her and her man hands. Megan Meyer was a fragile teen suffering from depression, ADHD, and obsessing about her weight. After supposedly dissing her friend, the friend and her mother retaliated by creating a fake MySpace account of a boy and flirting with Meyer. One fateful day, the AirSat's boyfriend ranted about how Megan was not a good friend and that the world would be better off if you weren't in it. Megan promptly went into her room and hung herself with a belt in her closet. She was only 13 years old at the time. I know.
And the mother was a part of this.
And the mother was not just a part of it, she was the one, it was her idea. The mother did it. She's been convicted. But what can you convict her of? This has to do with cyberbullying. How many laws are there out there about cyberbullying? Why should an adult get involved in an argument between 2 13-year-olds? As sad as that is. But she did, and now the child has hung herself. Not the easiest thing in the world to hang yourself, especially with a belt. Robin Williams did it. He had to lean forward and pull his feet out from under him in order to hang himself. He choked himself to death. I know. But see, you can always just stand up. It's not the easiest thing in the world. Technological advancements have brought new forms of victimization, identity theft, of course, in which information about an individual's personal and financial life is stolen by computer hackers and then used fraudulently. Cyber stalking is a technique favored by some sexual predators as a way to target victims. Cyberbullying can occur through blogs, Facebook, and other social networking sites. So you can cyber stalk, you can cyberbully, or you can steal people's identity and steal all their money. Sunday, I went to Bashes. They're Lebanese. Aren't they from Lebanon? I think they're Lebanese.
I think they are Lebanese.
Yeah, they're Lebanese. Bashes. I went to Bashes and I forgot to get money out of the bank, so I went to the ATM at Bashes and got money out of the ATM. So my wife calls me up about 4 hours later and says, you know, there's this really strange thing in our banking receipt. And she couldn't figure out, she thought it was somebody stealing our money, of course. It was me, I was stealing our money. You guys think that I'm probably the richest guy in the county, but the reality is my wife won't let me have any money. So, because if I have money, people borrow it from me or I buy some. Look at my office, it's covered with rugs. Where do you think those came from? And stuff. I'm just a sucker. Stuff. My wife doesn't like it. Anyway. In addition to it, she wanted to know if I had actually taken the money out. In addition to cyberbullying, psychologists have identified 4 other subtypes of bullying. Physical bullying, of course, verbal bullying, where you harass the individual verbally, social exclusion, and spreading rumors. When I was in college, I didn't sing the school song correctly. And because I didn't sing the school song,
You were amazed.
I had 2 choices. I could either have my head shaved in the shape of a W. I went to Wabash. I know. You like that? It's cute. Or I could be socially ostracized. And since I had a girlfriend and I certainly didn't want to look weak in front of her, I chose the social ostracization. I was socially ostracized.
The phone with the haircut and made it look cool. That's good.
It looks like a sideways mohawk. It would have looked that way. So I was social exclusion. I couldn't join a fraternity. I couldn't go to anything on campus. And at the end of the year, during the athletic banquet, they had to hold it off campus so that I could go.
Oh my goodness.
I know, it was bad, but they had to hold it off campus. So for the 4 years I was there, and of course I lettered every year in track, and I broke records every year in track. They had to hold the athletic banquet off camp for these spring sports.
So do you know the song now?
No, it's got 2 verses, and the second verse it's just an insane thing. I mean, they wrote it in 1889, okay? So it's words from 1889. None of them make sense. Yeah, I can sing the first verse.
He still doesn't know it.
Fairly well. Anyway, I was socially ostracized by a school. And now we're talking about social ostracization as if it's a form of bullying. I was bullied by an entire institution.
So how did you deal with it? Like, how did you cope?
How did I cope?
Yeah.
Well, I'm a kind of a mean son of a bitch. So what I did was, I was the best. I ran as fast as I possibly could in track, and I just kind of stuck it in their eye. Now the crazy thing was, I got my picture in the hometown newspaper. I got my picture in the paper all the time, but they wouldn't put my picture in the school newspaper. So in my yearbook, you know, I'm the guy in the back that nobody can see. You know, the guy that's standing behind the shot putter. That's me in the yearbook. But and in the newspaper, I was never in the newspaper. They mentioned my name, but they wouldn't put my picture. They put the guy that came in third in the 880. You know, I won the 440. I broke the school record. Did I get my picture in the paper? No, I never got my picture in the paper.
So how did that make you feel?
What, never getting my picture in the paper?
Like just overall, this whole experience?
Well, you know, I'm the kind of guy that people like. So the people that knew me they didn't ostracize me. It was just this was the rule. They couldn't put my picture in the paper. I couldn't go to dances. It's an old male college. Who am I going to dance with? So that's what I did. But I was lucky. I mean, if I hadn't been a track star, I would have been SOL, pretty much. I mean, nobody would have talked to me, potentially. But it was because I was a track star, and I'm a fairly easygoing guy, and people like me. So I had lots of friends. I still have lots of friends. I couldn't join the Sphinx Club. I know, I can't join the Sphinx Club. They haven't, I should be in the Athletic Hall of Fame, but I'll never make it. They'll never get me, because I'm socially ostracized. Anyway, it's a lot of fun. I can